Okay. Here we are for another episode of the Danny and Troy Show. And we've got an exciting another reading up ahead from Danny, and getting back into, I can tell, a little bit more of the creative expression through autofiction mixed with, different styles of writing, and also bringing in the future. So what we're talking about now is a little bit of preparation about what's happening with Danny. Are you still there, Danny? You're frozen. Oh yeah, it's good now, but getting warnings that my internet's a little unstable.
Yeah, you just paused there for like 10 seconds.
Okay. So what I was saying was, using autofiction as a method to create your own future is one possible application. And but also, yeah, I think in this piece, talking a lot about the past, but Danny has the opportunity to now be a visiting professor at the University of Slovenia. And this is...
Where is it, Troy? Where is it?
In Ljubljana.
Can you say the word?
Ljubljana.
Ljubljana.
The capital of Slovenia, which I think is amazing, because just after we started talking about it, this image of, or this branding of LOV, love, in the middle of the word Slovenia, or the name, I should say, of Slovenia popping out, and it ties in connections with Bhutan in happiness, love and happiness, kind of really, yeah, just nice rhyme to it. So yeah, that's how it's developing. So over to you, Danny.
Oh, that was good. Okay, I didn't know it was coming.
Okay.
I want everybody to know that I'm not on drugs, okay? Not tonight anyway. This is this is the drug that I'm on, right?
Yeah.
Dark chocolate with hazelnut.
What's the percentage of that one? I can't quite make it out down the bottom.
55.
55, yeah.
55% cacao.
Okay.
All right. Doesn't matter. It's
Well,
probably 55% sugar too.
the other 45%.
But I'm not even going to look. I don't want to know. So, and I've done some pretty significant damage on it. You can see.
Yep.
That's what's left. This part is left. I figure that's probably about a third. And the foil on it, very different. I guess the real cost of this chocolate is in the foil. It's not something I can just tear very easily.
Okay.
This has to be engineered. Pretty nice though, and it can be a COVID mask. We'll just punch a few holes in it, and nobody will say a word except maybe, "You got a piece of chocolate?" "No, I don't have any chocolate." "Go away." So anyway, you hear my cough is because 2 minutes before we started, I was munching on some of this chocolate, and then I drank, to clear my throat and my mouth, a little honey and vinegar. And Troy said, "Okay, it went down the wrong way." And it was like, yeah, it definitely did, but it went down. So my body's processing all of this, and I expect to be a very healthy guy by the end of this life. Maybe. Keep hoping and praying.
Okay.
Although I don't pray. Yeah. All right. So let me open my phone here, where I have started a treatment for this address, I'd like to call it, that will be, as I have been told, to the university itself on June 15th or thereabouts, right? So I started making some notes, which were based on 2 nights ago, 2 mornings ago, about 4 o'clock. I awoke from a dream, and I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to talk about suddenly. Wow. Because the subject, yeah, I love dreams, especially when they wake me up and say, "Hey, you write this down.
Yeah.
Like, me? It's early. I said, write this down. I said, okay, okay. So it starts off really simple because I had spoken with a friend of mine in Russia about devising a program for herself in which she's a horse whisperer, our friend Elena. And she was trying to reach some conclusion, but she had no plan. And I said, do me a favor, right? Let me know what the objective of your, this is annoying, I know, but please forgive me. What is the objective of your action? And the following morning, I came up with these ideas, which I have since complicated terribly, and which I'll read to you now, and just partially to see if it makes any sense to me.
Sure.
And for me, I need to read it out loud to someone, and I usually, seize Troy to do that. Tie his hands behind his back and put him in a chair, and so he has to listen, which you can see right now. Okay, so without further ado, and a few throat clearings and coughs, I will begin. And the title of this piece, this is all for me. This is not necessarily what I'm going to say, but
Right.
it's a way of me compiling my thoughts. And so this is first read out loud for me too.
Cool.
Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Okay. It's entitled, Let Us Begin with Bhutan, a Life Journey. The true nature of scaling and branding, which is my topic, is migrating from the Apollonian, as in Apollo, to the Dionysian, which is, Bacchus. Apollonian and Dionysian is a philosophical dichotomy most commonly associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, which is inspired by but not based on Greek mythology. The Apollonian force is defined by its reliance on reason, order, control, individuality, and sober thought, and seeks to bring philosophic order to the universe. Nietzsche, being concerned with art in his treatment of the concept, identified the visual arts as embodying an Apollonian force. More broadly, modern science, with its scientific method and methodological naturalism, could be seen as an Apollonian force, deriving orderly laws and principles to approximate, as clearly as possible, the operation of the universe. The Age of Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, science, and the power of thought, was driven by a decidedly Apollonian philosophy, and Nietzsche refers to philosophy itself as Apollonian. The Dionysian force is that which embraces mysticism, emotion, chaos, world harmony, and collective unity. Nietzsche's general take on the Dionysian is that it is pleasantly like being drunk. An example of the thoroughly Dionysian, Nietzsche cites the early modern European dancing mania. Enormous throngs of people dancing wildly through the streets to the point of collapse, not knowing where they were going or why they were dancing. Another example of a Dionysian philosophy is Romanticism, the counter-Enlightenment movement that emphasized human intuition and opposed the scientific rationalization of nature. The Apollonian and the Dionysian are philosophical and literary concepts represented by a duality between the figures of Apollo and Dionysus from Greek mythology. Its polarization is widely attributed to the work The Birth of Tragedy by Friedrich Nietzsche, though the terms have already been in use prior to this, such as the writings of poet Friedrich Hölderlin, historian Joachim Winckelmann, and others. The word Dionysian occurs as early as 1608 in Edward Topsell's zoological treatise, The History of Serpents. The concept has since been widely involved and discussed within Western philosophy and literature. The further developments of art is bound up with the duality of the Apollonian and the Dionysian, just as reproduction depends upon the duality of the sexes. Scaling, which is when revenue increases without a substantial increase in costs, is process-oriented as one's awareness keeps track of multiple changes and their satisfactions, as opposed to some program-oriented plan that focuses on presumed outcomes based on market forces or illusions of how things are going to be or how things are meant to be. Our story begins. There is Bhutanese G and H, which is gross national happiness, which serves as an attempt to control and view the intersection of science, the quantification of happiness by CBS, which is the Center for Bhutanese Studies, and art, which is anything made by people, through native culture and cottage industry as a destination for Indian labor amid the regulating hegemony of Buddhism, which is to say, the external authority of order, meant, as in multiple Asian societies, to maintain resentfulness, which is also known as slavery and mastery. In a social democracy like Bhutan, a constitutional monarchy, there is the concern for the preservation of centralized control with the illusion of freedom under the yoke of compliance and social inclusion versus expulsion of those who are outliers, fringe, criminal, deportees, and or dissidents, which are usually relegated to the areas of the arts, tradition, or migration, which is also known as expulsion. From within another shell, for example, the United Arab Emirates, where there is a Ministry of Happiness and its Islamic core enclosure awash in capital, it is befitting that a new hedonism should occur, replacing the usual events of war that gives vent to man's natural urges. Capitalism giving way to socialism is presently occurring in the United States of America. And alternatively, Russia is converting to capitalism from third stage socialism. It is the process of growth, whether one way or the other, a convergence of opposites, both accomplishing the surge of destruction evident in not regime change, but in social change. It is a dualistic concept, according to which there is a perpetual struggle between the two sets of opposing forces or ideals, one associated with Apollo, the god of the sun, and the other associated with Dionysus, the equivalent to the Roman Bacchus, the god of drunkenness. In his Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche wrote that art is based on a critical balance of these two forces, analyzing it with 6. Today, we witness the Dionysian overflowing the cup like driveling from the lips. Music flares as the urge of Apollonian desires reaches its pinnacle, inviting drunken orgies of lust and release from the orderly to the frenzies of chaos and destruction in the creation of the mutant. not an altogether disruptive force in that the rape upon it is as pleasing as gazing into the Dionysian abysses. In this state, one enriches everything out of one's own fullness. Whatever one sees, whatever wills is seen swelled, taut, strong, overloaded with strength. A man in this state transforms things until they mirror his power, until they are reflections of his perfection. This having to transform into perfection is art. It is formative. Today, a company we work with called Uwa is evidence of the Dionysian. This tempts my interpretation of this movement in global expression. Music and dance are primal, and until now in a relatively virginal state. Uwa's positional power is in its resistance, if possible, under the seductive power of materialism and its originality presently bereft of foreign colonialism to a degree as neo-colonial powers seek to profit from her resources and indebtedness to capital, dualism, and its segmentation into debt and repayment as its bastardly dependence on foreign capital. Debt is guilt, and the economic situation is or should be in reverse for the European colonialism. As this client recently announced, there is no music without Africa, and no Africa without music. And I might add dance, wherein each is symbolic of the Dionysian and the chaotic liberation of the whole failed attempt at a systematized earth. All wealth comes from nature, and materialization of the earth's blood is only regulated by a worn-out approach to global control, as it is otherwise known, a new world order. Nietzsche's love and understanding of music shaped his philosophy in more ways than one. It inspired his writing style, which was lyrical and poetic when compared to the dry and unimaginative language used by his predecessors. More importantly, music played an indispensable role in Nietzsche's understanding of life. So much so that, according to him, one could not exist without the other. Furthermore, my parent company in Australia won Datalogical Services, or DLS, implementation of eudaimonia, Aristotle's concept that the goal of life is happiness, and it's to be achieved through reaching one's full potential, instead of the promise of a simple happiness, like a sitting Buddha depicts, and other styles of revamping or scaling as long as it grows and emerges. To keep it confined is not evidence of scaling, but true to its previous masters parading under the guise of democracy, which lures populations into the next scaling of people's lives. It is but entrapment and social engineering in order to maintain the status quo. As Machiavelli said in his descriptions of how political systems evolve, we are destined to go from democracy into mob rule because of the failure of the elite, who are unaccustomed to mentoring, but who chose to accept themselves as leaders, who lead by following diktats. We may find some similarities with the evolution of consciousness in this, whereby the slow progression from one state to the following does not disallow the functioning of the previous state to continue as the next emerges from the previous ever overdetermined state, making all systems operational simultaneously. DLS operates not only as a collection of 200,000 global sourced data scientists, but also as a reference to creative expression, the necessary component of change and inspiration to harness the fires of change. The very base from which creative impulse emerges of the same components that previously were utilized to construct Apollonian ends that seduced peoples with beauty without substance. Presently, DLS is delivering a mentoring program in lieu of leadership, which DLS deems a misrepresentation. Leadership falls short of its purported role today. In the past, one led by example, not as a supreme commander assigning duties and obligations to underlings, the little people, who are only too grateful to their master for pointing the way. Leadership has become a concept that assigns followers with directions by which they are to dutifully complete without question, because they are either lost or without the wherewithal to go by themselves. A leader then is a singular performance, whereas mentoring is helping others achieve clarity on their development of the fullest utilization of their talents and abilities. New IPM Group Ljubljana, Innovation, Progress, and Management, is working with the private office of Al Maktoum in Dubai upon my arrangements and recommendation to fund international business startups and advise on scaling and development both in Slovenia and the EU, but in the UAE as well. IPM may also find themselves in a position for stitching together international happiness ministries, UAE and Bhutan, for example, with Slovenia as a world capital of love, which is to say, love is the urge towards reunification, and consolidate splinter groups desiring to reform the planet into a more suitable habitat beneficial to development, especially Africa. Witness the global community and the emergence of new economic forces and heretofore non-existent alliances. For example, BRICS, the Global South, and multipolarity, while present forces attempt to re-enter new markets with the same old strategies that has depleted their attraction. None of this is adherent to a lust for riches, but burning desires for creative expression, suppressed by a relentless drive of self-gratification. There is a broad distinction between riches and wealth. A rich man is a poor man with money. A wealthy man is one who is not overcome with the subjective, lustful nature, but one who appropriates capital at a fruitful value exchange. He has objectivity. I attribute the ability to see things the way I have described above to what I may casually call Russia thinking, which not only confuses the West by not being pliable with their theories of cause and effect, but is the foundation of conflict between East and West, taking into account that I do not assign East to Russia, because in the 25 years I have been coming and going to Russia, and the time I have lived in the Far East, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Bhutan, I have concluded, or I should say, validated the premise I formulated in my doctoral dissertation on image and identity from the Russian idea that Russia is a buffer zone, impregnable to Western thinking because the West, principally dependent on Cartesian thought, is inflexible enough to seek only conflict with the principles of freedom and slavery enumerated by Nikolai Alexandrovich Berdayev that began my cultural curiosity of the causes of the Cold War. Berdayev was a Russian philosopher, theologian, and dissident Christian existentialist who emphasized the existential spiritual significance of human freedom and the human person. Alternative historical spellings of his name in English include Berdyaev and Berdyaev, and his name given Nicholas and Nicholas. Russian paleontologist and Christian anthropologist Alexander Kramov attributes his ideas about an atemporal human fall to Berdyaev and Trubetskoy. So that's where I am so far in my preparation for powdering people's brains. How about yours, brain, Troy? Is it powdered? Comments are welcome.
I'm still, oh, I was on mute. Yeah, I'm on unmuted. Good. So yeah, there's so much in there, and that's I
That's
think
what you
the point.
always say.
You could take one sentence of that and talk about it for 3 hours, but like you were saying, there's, I don't know if Swiss cheese is the right analogy, but there is pockets of information, pockets of topics, pockets of feelings. And going back to the aspects of autofiction, the bringing in the facts, bringing in the future, bringing in the possibilities, enabling a feeling. This is what I get from it. To go back to the aspect of autofiction is not to be understood, but is to enable a feeling or some emotions. So yeah, I totally get that. In terms, there are things, the way it flows, I don't understand what's this about, what's that. I'd have to read into that. Let me grab my understanding of, oh, I've never ever heard that word before. All those things are going on in my mind. But yeah, at the same time, it's giving a feeling, it's giving an emotion. You're using very powerful words in there sometimes, like, mentioning, well, sexuality, rape, and all forceful kind of aspects, which sparks feelings. But really, yeah, this is nothing new. And I've talked about this in the past in our other videos, the opening this recording. We talked about this being an exercise for you, of your reading, of how you felt, and let it come out. So I'm more interested to hear what came from it to you.
Well, I've been quite loose in talking about these kinds of things with Elena, who is a very powerful command of psychology, of creative expression, of her own place, as she likes to say, in space.
Right.
And I know what she's talking about. And really, when I'm writing about things like this, or leaving myself open to dreams, I'm not interpreting them. I'm using a dream almost as like a diving board. And when I talk about things with you, with her, with other people, I find that I reach a point which I'm happy to flush, where these restrictions placed on me by the correct way, or the right thing to do, or all of this mumbo jumbo that's been drilled into me since birth here in the US, I come into conflict with. And I look at Africa from my present position as I mentioned, a virginal territory of not the last frontier, which I'm sure Hollywood would love to just, revise Star Trek with Africa, because you've got the same aliens, the white boys from the north, who are going to come in and take advantage of the valence that you have in your society to either let you starve, massacre each other, whatever, to their benefit. And I think, and I've expressed this to the client, that they have a real opportunity for themselves to take advantage of the power that there is. We talked about sex for a minute, right? Those sexual impulses that seem to accompany ecstatic dancing, music, and command their own space, rather than letting Britain and France and other post-colonial powers who still have military exercises in Africa. And for what? You want to come in and kill people because they're not obeying the order established by the French colonialists, or choose one. You can do Portuguese versus Spanish, who utilize their tools established by this Apollonian rationality, which has, from my perspective, hypnotized people everywhere, not just in Africa, but in the West as well, thinking that, well, the end of life is signaled by accumulating huge amounts of capital.
Sure.
I don't see it that way. I
Okay.
mean, I'm Nietzschean in the way that I believe I can receive the most benefit from my life by keeping my suffering alive.
Okay.
If I, can just, thinking of Bhutan as I say that, right?
Right.
And all of this nonsense about, people don't need to suffer, I disagree.
Well,
I even said to the developers of Kua, I said to them, you do your best work when you suffer. So suffer.
sure.
And I left the table. And fortunately, I think they understood what I was talking about.
Well, yeah, there's a big risk. I mean, in there, I see people, it's not really a risk, but people get things misinterpreted. I guess my shirt's a good way representation of how to
Your point
take
of view,
things-
huh?
Yeah, different point of view. Like if you just had, a section of the picture, you don't know what it could be. Like the less you see of it, and once these words are written, it helps kind of say, oh, okay, more information being delivered around a piece of information. With the small piece of information, people will interpret the right way, the wrong way, whether it's right or wrong. People, it's no one's decision to say, except the internal aspect of, yeah, I like that, I understand that, and I agree. So as an external purveyor of information, yeah, it's I think my job really, going back to delivering information, is done at that point, and what happens after that is up to the people that receive it or see it or take action from it.
Can you clarify that a little more?
Well, yeah, I'm just going off the aspect of
Interpretation, right?
well, let's talk
Or
about
not?
suffering, because you were talking
Okay.
about suffering. I don't want to jump too far off that, but yeah, saying, well, that if I was to say, life is suffering, and this is drawn from Buddhist Four Noble Truths, that people will say, no, that's not correct, or, oh yeah, I can see your point. But because it's just a small little piece. And yeah, if I deliver that information, what happens after that is their choice. And what I feel about it and what it means to me is totally different. Now, yeah, I think going a step further to talk about the subject is that we can control our own suffering. If we, and this I heard, I think it was Wim Hof, the Iceman, he hiked up the Mount Everest in his nothing but boxer shorts, talks about bringing suffering, but directing suffering, the type of suffering, whether it's having a cold shower or jumping into an ice bath, or going to the gym, or working in the garden with the hoe. There is going to be suffering, but it's your choice, and we have the power as an individual to decide what type of suffering. And we can sit in our corner and cry and be in despair because of how cruel the world is, or we can move out of that space and still it's suffering, but it's directed suffering. Create your own suffering, otherwise somebody's going to create it for you.
If you believe in it.
Well,
Some of the things that you said, I made a couple of quick notes here. It seems to me now that I've distanced myself somewhat from Bhutan, and you too, in a way, is that when someone tells me something like the Four Noble Truths, I mean, my ears perk up. I'm thinking, oh, wonderful. Finally, someone's coming with the truth. And, I have a story, I believe I've told you, about when I go to Burroughs Wellcome out of college to ask for a job. And I went to the manager, the Western Hemisphere, president of Western Hemisphere. And I told his secretary that, please tell him, I was downstairs, that Danny Teal is here with the truth.
Yep.
And she got on the phone in my presence, and she said, yes, Mr. President, Danny Teal, there's a man down here named Danny Teal, and he says he's here with the truth. And her eyes widened and she says, please go on up. So she got in the elevator and she went up with me. I mean, I was like in the middle of what, I don't know, Yankee Stadium, it felt like, with a desk in the middle. And I walked up to him and he said, I hear you've come here with the truth. What is the truth? And I said, truth is I need a job. And the funny part about that was I took that from an Elvis movie.
Sure.
But it worked, okay? At least to that point in time in
Right.
the conversation there, which is not as entertaining as, the part I've just described. And I'm thinking, who said it's the Four Noble Truths? And why not 5 Noble Truths? Or the 1 Noble Truth, or about the 10,000 Noble Truths, right? Truth is, of course, subjective reality. Everybody's got their own truth. Don't tell me you have the truth. I'll decide for myself what the truth is. But they push this crap for thousands of years,
Well,
obviously, on
this is
people.
Can I
believe
interrupt?
it.
Because I think,
Yeah.
I see that it's, yeah, it can get corrupted, and people do say, sign up for Buddhism, but the ultimate fundamentals is just some information. How you interpret it is up to you. If you get excited, oh, finally someone's here for the truth, that means you're looking for something that you don't have. But you said it yourself, it's up to you. You have the truth inside you. You decide. So to get in this space of, how dare they try and tell me what the truth is? That's going down the wrong path. It's just information. It's just a picture. It's
Yeah.
up to you to decide whether
Yeah.
you like it or it's meaningful.
Yeah.
Or you see an evil duck. Oh my God, look at that duck. It looks like he's gonna kill everybody. Or it's a rabbit just having a relaxing.
Vampire duck.
Yeah. See, the way you take it is up to you. And you said those, but then you were starting to say again, like that they were wrong because of the way the crops, but things do get corrupted. You know, we don't have to look far from any religion to say how, you know, kind of misguided it can get. However,
Yeah.
the fundamentals is information, just like going back to the reading that you just gave us. People will interpret, people will go, well, I don't agree with that, or I understand that point and I have no idea what that is about. Or other people will say, this is a, you know, masterpiece. I understand everything. I get what this is saying, but again, it may be totally different from what you intended or had in your mind when you started. But still, it's information being released.
It's like a drug, you know, who was it, Marx, who said that religion is the opium of the masses?
Right.
I think it's one of the opiums of the masses.
Well,
You know, I would also say that, you know, being successful is another dose of opiates, right?
sure.
And take, for example, you know, the soul, right? And save your soul. So in order to save your soul, you know, you've got to follow these 10 rules. Let me get rid of this interruption. And, you know, it's like, who said my soul's going to burn for all eternity in hell? Why? Because I gravitate from one system of belief, you know, and belief is not knowing. Belief is what? It's seduction. It's ignorance. If you have to believe, you are showing your ignorance. Absolutely.
Okay.
But if you know, which was said to me by a purported Buddhist in Bhutan, in Paro, big rich guy, you know, who has enough money now that he can turn and address his soul. But quite a nice guy. Gave me a week in his resort, you know, and I thought was really very nice. But you know, in some ways, when people introduce concepts, I hit my thumb with a hammer. Are you suffering? Well, I could be, right? And you're going to define what suffering is so that I can relate this physical pain to some mental concept about what I'm experiencing. I mean, it's pretty widely accepted, I would think, you know, or you're not, you haven't eaten or whatever. You choose anything. And it's like, we actually have the power in our minds to disregard suffering. You know, it could be in that I'll never learn anything if I live inside of a safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, okay. So getting up in the morning, I'm telling you, that's suffering. I can't stand it. Maybe. Okay. Not for me, you know, it's somehow or another lassoing my life and not being subject to programs that people issue to get you to think a certain way, and then they slip you a Mickey Finn. Well, there was this guy, he was the son of God, man. Let me tell you. It's like, how the fuck do you know? What, he had it written on his forehead? Or did you come from, you know, a small country town like where I am right now, and somebody said something you didn't understand? So we say it again this time, except say it in a parable so I can get it. And it's like, and then what? Okay, I'll eat my bread, I'll eat my fish, and I'll go back to my job. Or I'll be, you know, your servant forever. First of all, there's something wrong with being a servant. Unless, of course, you choose. Then it's your part of your life path, right? Why should I complain unless I'm not running my own life? And if you don't or you can't, try it, hope you do better next time around,
Sure.
right? But do me a favor before you pass over, stop eating my food, right? Stop eating some other worthwhile person's food, right?
Well,
As you occupy, a certain square meter of the earth and its resources. We're not hard enough. This is what I don't like about Christianity. And I was raised a Christian, until I busted loose, is that it creates weak people. Forgive and forget, turn the other cheek. Sure, let me just beat the hell out of you. And you can fantasize that somehow or another, this is going to, print a ticket for your front row seat in heaven. And I think that's being used today on masses of people. And if you don't like that one, okay, let's choose democracy, or let's choose Islam, or let's choose Buddhism, as I mentioned, or whatever. I don't like isms or ocracies. I like to make up my own mind about things.
sure.
And this New World Order nonsense is part of this programming of
Sure.
people to get them to comply. And it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave the room, right? If I ever was in the room, because I'm too involved in my own life than to give it away to somebody else for their utility. Can't do it. Thanks,
Sure.
though. Thanks for the invite. Got to go.
Well, yeah, that's what I think comes out for me is you either create your own suffering or somebody's going to create it for you.
How about we have no suffering?
Well,
we reinterpret it.
That's a good idea, but
that word
that
has
would make
too much
everything
baggage
white.
with it.
So that would make everything white or everything black. We talked about this in a previous recording. It's like if there was no color in the world, we wouldn't see them. So I have recently, from your input, come across the Aristotle model of eudaimonia, which is based on the vice. So these vices, there's in-betweens. Let me turn my camera off and on and see if that comes back. Okay, I was frozen there. So, for example, courage is a vice between cowardice and recklessness. So there is suffering and there is bliss. Okay, so you can't live in
Growth
bliss. Sure, you can't just be. I mean, people can find if there was just always suffering, people wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm in pain." They just get used to it.
Troy. Yeah.
If there was always bliss, then everybody would just be okay. There's no. They'd start hating bliss because it was so boring. So you're shifting from one to the end, and it's a continual vice of pulling you back and forth. And if that doesn't happen, life would be, we would be dead. It'd be boring. It'd be everything white. There's no perception, no interest, no enjoyment. So we are in this vice, being pulled from one, whether it's being courageous, recklessness versus cowardice, pain versus non-pain, suffering versus bliss. So find your balance, and people will find their balance. I'm so balanced now because I believe in God and Jesus was here and he died for me on the cross, and that's their own reality and that's their medium. That's where they decide that they are comfortable. And yeah, when they push out, it's a little bit more painful. When they bring back, it's more bliss. But when they're going into that phase of, okay, it's more bliss, they're not living their actual decided lifestyle. They're just going on holiday or whatever. They might be, if they're a Buddhist, traveling up to Taksan, the tiger's nest, one of the most holiest places that Buddhism holds in the realm of what, yeah, I was going to say chapels, but what are they called? Anyway, so this is where I think it's all personal, and people get just distracted by other people saying, you're on the wrong path. You shouldn't be a Christian. You should be a Buddhist. Or you're on the wrong path. You're telling people the wrong thing. You should be telling them this. But really, it's individual. If you find your own spot, your own balance, and not that we're not going to remove anything. Suffering's going to be there. Blissfulness is going to be there. Everything's going to be there, but just find where it is. It's just like the autopilot on the airplane. It's not flying in a straight line. It's going off track, and then realizing it's off track and bringing it back. But then again, it goes off track and realizes it's off track until it continually flies to its destination.
Yeah, I would like to propose, instead of GNH, we do GPS.
Sure. I love the aspect of building a compass for everybody. This is something that I see in line with eudaimonian mentoring, which you touched on in the piece you're talking about. It's just, if you are feeling a little lost, if you are feeling like you're not sure which way to go, if you want to move, the first part, if you're wanting to go on an adventure that we call life, then you can use a compass. It's good to have a compass in your toolbox if you're on a journey. And this can be a compass, eudaimonia mentoring. And what does it do? It just asks you where you are. What do you want?
Yeah, we don't have any answers. We're not looking for answers.
It's you, that the person that's going through it will need to define their own answers. Because we have some questions that are insightful and thought-provoking in order for you to decide what it is you want in life, covering 6 areas that everybody has in their life. And find the medium in between of where you are, where you want to push it, to know that you're going to spring back. Don't spring back too far, because you'll find yourself, in despair or having problems.
And if you'll act now, we'll give you this and that and something else and a discount. We'll sign you up in the rest of your life and you'll be happy. You won't suffer anymore. For $9.95 today only, $9.95. Or maybe more appropriately, $2.98.
Yeah, just went up.
I guess must be all that Russian thinking, huh?
Well, that's one.
Oh, no, you'll infect my brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, sorry, too late. We've already infected you.
So, yeah, this aspect of Russia thinking that you mentioned, Russia thinking, just those 2 words, you could talk about for 3 hours, 4 hours, 3 weeks. And that was one pocket of information in this vast array of introduction to information, ideas, concepts, ways of thinking, interesting stories of the past, interesting people being mentioned. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't really hear what you said. I didn't get the message when I asked you, what did you get from it? I think we jumped out of that, but Yeah, you've read that because it was the first time you've actually read it to somebody out loud, and there was value in that. And yeah, did you want to go back to that? Of did you what was happening as you were reading it? What was going on in your own mind when you were hearing your own words?
I was making sure that I was pronouncing the words correctly. That's it,
Right.
and that also, of course, on automatic, I'm looking for, I think there was one word in there. It was supposed to be from, and it came across as form. So
Okay.
I'm listening to the concept I'm constructing, and then there's a word that doesn't belong there, and it's like, what? What am I saying anymore? I forgot. Really get sidetracked into stuff. Just trying to be free and easy with it. But I feel that when I do read something, I bring it to life. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of dead words on a page. Yeah.
Sure.
And of course, trying to emphasize within myself the emotive quality of the thought, because it has to be pointed with, I don't know, my own interpretation, because I can read the words and it has no meaning. But if I give emphasis to something, it changes. And then you may have noticed it's the way I speak, the way I write. And there was a one sentence in there that must have been, 5 minutes long. It was just one sentence.
Sure.
And
Sure.
just one leads to the other. It's like, when is this going to end?
Right.
But I feel that when I get to a period or a comma, if I even use them, it's an indicator to me that I should probably slow down and let that sink in before I, jump to another association,
Yeah.
so that I can deliver a complete thought. But, who knows? Who knows?
You
Maybe it's just a jumble of words, but I hope not.
you
I'm
talking about
just taking dictation, man. This isn't mine. This was this is what was given to me, from space,
sure.
as Elena likes to say. Okay, blame space, man.
Well, I think it's a great place to bring back the topic of music, which is in there also, and you talk about it in the past as well. Have a beat. There's a beat to whether it's a
Ah,
screenplay or a written text, and there's a beat to your life. It's whether you're on in beat, you can be going tick, 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 or you can be a little bit off beat. And
mm, mm,
yeah, it's finding that beat. And
mm. Yeah,
that's the fun part, is
yeah.
finding the beat. And when you find a beat, and musicians do this all the time, it's a hit. It's like people just realize, oh, these guys have created something amazing. It's a masterpiece because it's on beat. Boom, 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 boom.
Thank you, Troy. That's wonderful. Well,
Okay,
shall we call it quits for the night?
sure.
And see you again tomorrow. I'll change it, of course, for tomorrow,
Okay.
and
Great.
add something else to it.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
for being such a good listener. I appreciate it. Okay.
Talk tomorrow.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. If there's anybody there.